Greetings and thank you for coming to today's operator meeting. My name is Jenny Lehman and I'll be your host today. We will take questions at the end of all presentations, so please chat those in as they come to you. First up, we have Diane McCoy presenting on Rule 420 and 434C reminders. Diane, let me get your presentation up here real quick.
All right, I just want to test. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great.
All right, can you see that okay?
Yes. Cool. You just flip over to the next slide. So good morning, my name is Diane McCoy. I'm an engineering supervisor here. Just have a couple reminders to go over today. I'm going to start with a reminder about Rule 420 and the requirement to have a current wellbore diagram on file. Wells are required to have an annual braided head test, and some wells by COA or order have increased frequency of braided head test. If the wellbore configuration has changed, please include an updated wellbore diagram as an attachment with the Form 17. The next slide, please. When wellbore diagrams are submitted, please ensure that they are labeled correctly and do not combine with another document type. For example, if you're submitted on a 6 intent, make sure you have the attachments labeled correctly. So a wellbore diagram is a standalone attachment as a wellbore diagram. If you're also attaching, logs or procedures, label those correctly. And there are menus within web forms to get those labeled accurately. And it's going to make it so much easier to find the wellbore diagrams in each well file. And we're also going to be rolling out a tool within web forms to allow operators to audit their well inventory and check for which wells do or are missing a wellbore diagram on file with ECMC. And so having those attachments when they're submitted labeled correctly is going to make that tool work more accurately. And also on this slide, I've just outlined some best practices of items that should be included with all wellbore diagrams. We also have some older guidance on our website that we're looking at updating to have out to operators. But pretty much, I think everyone knows how to draw a wellbore diagram, but these are just some items that are always good to have on your wellbore diagram. Next slide, please. So switching gears a little bit, the second matter I wanted to have a reminder as I discussed today is the need for operators to take action on inactive wells. So this is just a copy of the definition of inactive well from our rules. Oil or gas well that has been shut in for 12 months, TA for 6 months, or suspended operations or waiting on completion for 24 consecutive months, all become designated as inactive. We really want to highlight that SO and WO wells also get that inactive designation and require action. Next slide, please. Again, just in a more copy from the rule, this is 434C. It outlines the requirement for the need to plug inactive wells. So within 6 months of a well being designated as inactive, an operator is expected to take action, and the default action is to have that well plugged and abandoned. There are also other alternative actions I'm going to outline in the next slide. So next slide, please. So again, within 6 months of the well being designated as inactive, the well is to be plugged and abandoned. If you do not want to plug and abandon that well, other action must be taken, but it needs to be within that 6-month period. You can return the well to production. You can submit a Form 5B. You can submit a Form 6A and include that well. And these requirements apply to all inactive oil and gas wells. So again, just trying to highlight on that suspended operation and waiting on completion wells also can fall into this category and would require action within that 6-month period. And then kind of a general reminder here, as you audit your well inventories to ensure compliance with Rule 434Z, make sure you're checking all your pieces. Often there's kind of a chain event of other paperwork or notifications that are needed. So if you need to get your TA sundry submitted, any mechanical integrity test, make sure your production reporting is up to date and accurate. And I think, as always, we have additional guidance on our website related to any forms that need to be submitted, and there's a existing guidance on our website related to 434C specifically. So that's all out there on our website, and I think that's my last slide. Yep, that's all I have. Thank you for listening.
Awesome. Thank you, Diane. Next up, we have a presentation by Rick Allison, the CDPHE 2024 State Action Plan for PFAS. Take it away, Rick.
Thanks. Good morning. I'll put up a slide. Hopefully that looks like a...
You could do full screen mode, that'd be great.
Yeah, that's... I was looking for my... Here we go. Did that go on the right screen? Looks like it.
No. It's a little off to the side, actually. If you go to slideshow at the top. Yeah, slideshow right at the top of menu.
Yeah, it's putting it on my extended display. So,
Okay.
but if everyone can see the slide, I mean, we'll put the slide in the archive too. I guess the point really we want to make is that CDPHE created a PFAS action plan in 2019, and they undertook a sampling campaign. They of certain communities' waters, surface waters across the state, and various other media. And that can all be found at the first link at the top of this slide. And that's all led up to CDPHE to create a draft 2024 PFAS action plan for the state of Colorado. And this is really just an awareness for the oil and gas industry as an opportunity to be a stakeholder and engage in their stakeholder process. So the key components of CDPHE's 2024 draft plan are to identify and minimize Colorado's Coloradans' exposure to PFAS, assess and provide information on PFAS health risks, and also limit the amount of PFAS that enters the environment and address known PFAS contamination in the environment. So the process to engage is to, one, if you're not already aware, follow these hyperlinks, follow the hyperlink to the PFAS Action Plan webpage, and that'll have information on, it'll have both a copy of the draft plan, and it has links to 2 upcoming stakeholder meetings, one on January 18th and the second on February 27th. And interested parties can register for those stakeholders. And then public comment is also available through CDPHE's website, and that period will be open through mid-March. That's all I have. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Rick. Next up, we have the quarterly water reporting by location, presented by Greg Duranolo.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Greg Duranolo. I'm the environmental manager here at ECMC. I am going to start a slideshow and try and share my screen. Let's see. Can you all see my screen and can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. So as you all should be aware, we are working to implement House Bill 23-1242. We've been working through the monthly reporting by well process. And now we are moving on towards the quarterly reporting by location. We've met with some operators and discussed, what the sort of data needs are from the operators' ends, and we've also reviewed the statute and worked with our internal teams to come up with what we believe will be a efficient and robust reporting protocol for that. So just to review the statutory language, which is now in 3460-134, section 3. Basically, starting in January of 2024, operators will be required to report the volume and whether the volume of fresh water and whether the fresh water was acquired from industrial, commercial, municipal, or agricultural water sources, the volume of all recycled or reused produced water used at an oil and gas location, the volume of all produced water disposed from an oil and gas location, including the disposal method and disposal location, and the volume of all produced water that is removed from the location for recycling and reuse, as well as the total produced water volumes from all those wells at the location. Section B just talks about the timing required for that, and no later than 45 days after the end of the previous calendar quarter, and then ensuring that we're including all the water that's managed at a location, with the exception of stormwater. So I just wanted to sort of oversimplify that statutory requirement for everyone. If you take section 3A and 3B together, basically talking about the reporting timeframes, it's 45 days after the end of the prior quarter. So the quarter that precedes January 1st, 2024 is Q4 2023. So our interpretation of that is that reporting will be necessary by February 14th, 2024, or 45 days after the end of the prior quarter. And just to summarize those, statutory requirements for reporting, it's fresh water coming on site, recycled or reused produced water coming on site, produced water going off site for disposal, and as well as how and where it's disposed, and produced water going off site for recycling and reuse, and then all produced water from all wells. So how are we going to do that? A new form, of course. We are a forms-driven agency, as our former permitting manager, Jane Stanczyk, would say repeatedly. We are a forms-driven agency. So this will be a new form that we'll develop, but it will be similar in some ways to the monthly reporting by well, and it will be similar to the Form 7 production reports. But since the timing is not does not coincide with the monthly production reports, we're not going to stick it on that form. We're going to develop a new form. There's some other advantageous reasons for doing it that way as well. It will be a form with data templates for upload. And just to simplify sort of what those buckets of data look like, it's going to be the production data, and that's water production, the fresh water coming on site, the recycle or reuse coming on and going off site. So that'll cover sites like centralized E&P waste management facilities where there may not be any wells, but there's water coming on and going off in a given quarter, and then a summary of the disposal. I'm going to walk through what we have developed just in spreadsheet format to deliver to our developers to build this form from. And this, again, will be made available on our website. The spreadsheet will be made available on our website, in the operator meeting files for now. And then we will post announcements on the homepage of our progress. But this will give you an idea of sort of how we're going to lay out the data collection. So first tab will be, a standard operator information tab. It'll have the operator info will auto-populate. There'll probably be a wizard to enter, your operator data, just like you're familiar with. The contact information for who's filling out the form will be fillable. And then we'll have a quarter and year field available so that operators can indicate what their filing is for. The first actual data tab will be the water produced. So the way I laid this out, if you'll recall from the way the statute is laid out, water produced was sort of the last requirement. The way we've chosen to lay this form out is water produced will be the first tab, and then it'll sort of move through the operational phase and get to disposal at the end. And I felt like that just applied some logic to sort of how that was laid out for thought processes purposes. In each of the tabs, you'll see some color coding. I believe this is pale yellow, pale blue, pale green. The yellow is any column or cell that is a location ID number that needs to be input. The blue is actual water data that needs to be input. And then green is information that is calculated by the form. So you won't have to put in this information. Instead, the form will calculate it and give you an opportunity to review it and say, yes, that's what I meant to say there. So the way this is laid out, there's I've got some examples in here that track through the entire form that example form that I've got. And so you guys can certainly take this away, play around with it, look it over, and come up with specific questions, after this meeting. And throughout this presentation, you'll see this area that's outlined in heavy black. And that is really the area to focus on for your data input. So the first tab, water produced, this is pretty straightforward. You'll enter the location IDs of all the locations you're reporting. You'll total up the monthly, or you'll enter the monthly volume totaled for all wells on the pad. So for example, location number 1 here is an existing production location with single well, and first month was 50 barrels, second was 49, and third was 51. Just to keep things round, I assumed generally that wells would produce 50 barrels a month in my example. So a 10 well pad had 450 barrels, 450 barrels, and 500 barrels. Why? Because a couple of wells were shut in for work in month 1 and 2. So the form will show you whether this was January, February, and March, or October, November, and December, based on the quarter that you input on the operator info tab. So that tab should be pretty straightforward. The next one is the freshwater acquired for use at the oil and gas location. So again, we've got location IDs and then water volumes to be reported. We'll have an individual column for industrial, commercial, municipal, or agricultural, and you'll just enter the volume that was acquired from those sources. This should be consistent with data that's reported to Division of Water Resources associated with how fresh water is being obtained. Notably, the prior tab, the production tab, and this freshwater tab, there should only be one row of data per location ID. So even if you obtained water from 2 different municipalities, we would want to see those totaled up and put into the municipal column. So again, this tab should be fairly straightforward. I'm sure we'll run into site-specific questions, but we're hoping that this one will be straightforward. So the recycle or reused produced water tab is more challenging because we're reporting this is where we get into, I've discussed this before with the monthly production reporting, the many-to-many relationships. So we have opportunities to report things that, water may be going to or coming from multiple locations, and so it needs to be reported multiple times. We've got sort of two columns that say this is the water that's coming into the site, this is the water that's going off the site, and then this is the water that's going off the site to another operator. So those are the different statutory citations there that require those data to be reported. And you'll see in this example, this location number 8 is a centralized E&P waste management facility. And so that's going to have water going off-site. That's going to have water going off-site, and then that water also goes on-site to these other locations. So it looks like that water gets reported twice, but the statute requires that both of those actions be reported. Again, these green cells, this is total water volumes. You'll notice even though location 8 has 3 rows here, it only gets totaled once. So I've got on this next slide, I took out the totals so that you could see the descriptions of those examples, so that the explanation for those is clear. So you may need to kind of toggle back and forth between those as you look this over in order to understand sort of how that's laid out. The last tabulations, this looks very much like the monthly report of operations. The location from which water is being disposed of, and the disposal method, and then the disposal location. So again, this tab you can have, sorry about that. You can have one location reported on multiple rows because the water is going to multiple places. I didn't include descriptions of this because I think it's fairly straightforward based on the reporting that's been done so far by Well. And let's see, I think that based on what we've done by location or by Well should be fairly straightforward for location. Notice on the surface discharge, I did include the option to type in a different state if it's discharged under a permit in a different state. Here's some notes just on the way these slides are laid out for your information purposes. The cells, as I mentioned, outlined in heavy black are the data for which the operator is responsible for reporting. The column A, this is just kind of information as to what you're seeing to the right. So that obviously won't be included in the data templates. Also these sort of header rows and these bottom instructional rows, those won't be included in the data templates, but hopefully they help everyone understand what we're doing at this point. The example locations that I've used should track through multiple tabs on the form. So I tried to make this as reasonable a facsimile of real life, locations as I could, while still using obviously fictitious data. As I mentioned, the first 2 tabs will not require multiple rows for any location. There'll be a single row for each location reported. Explaining the color coding, I mentioned the light yellow, light blue, and light green. Light magenta, there's just a couple columns that are a little bit different, so I highlighted them differently. And then, as you go through this, you'll note that some of the data that's being required in here seems like it should be available in ECMC databases. And we would like to be able to pull that data and save everyone sort of the hassle of reporting things twice or reporting things in multiple ways. At this time, we don't have all of those systems built, so we are asking operators to report per the statutory requirements. One of the issues that we may have in trying to do a data pull is the timing. So, for example, if this quarterly reporting by location is due at the same time as the last monthly reporting by location or by well for that quarter, ECMC won't have the data in its system yet in order to pull to complete the data requirement for the quarterly reporting. So that's one of the things that we're trying to work out. But at this point, our need is to implement the statute. So that's where we're at right now. But I think you'll see in there, for example, on the disposal tab, we should be able to query our database, pull for a given location, pull all of the disposal information for the wells on that location in that quarter, and that should be the right number. We also expect, though, that some of the location data will true up some of the other data, and so it may not be, 1,001 barrels is the total, and 1,001 barrels is what gets reported on this. We may see some slight discrepancies in that reporting. So we do want to see all of the data reported as per the statute for now, and we'll move forward from there. So next, I'm going to talk a little bit about implementation, and actually, I'll probably turn it over to Chris Eisinger to take a look at this tab or this slide and talk about where we're going with the implementation of this and where we're at right now.
Thanks, Greg. Good morning, everyone. So as Greg said, we're at a stage where we've had sort of discussions with various folks, and we've finalized kind of an initial design, and we'll be giving this design recommendation to our developers. From what I understand, the complexity and the timing of this, that we should have this form essentially developed by the end of this month. I'd like to think towards the end of the fourth week in January. And then we're going to do some testing internally and externally before planning to release this in early February. Realizing that means that with a middle of February deadline to provide this, there may be some instances of where you'll want to start populating the spreadsheet that Greg is providing now just to get your data in order. But I'm hopeful that you will be actually able to use the form. The difference between this form and the produced water on the Form 7 is that this is being a whole new form. We don't have to put a round peg into a square hole. And in fact, we can design this form exactly as we need to. So I think it will be a much smoother process as far as the form goes and the functionality. It will be in the new eForm platform as opposed to utilizing web forms. So just be aware of that. The next slide, Greg. So speaking of the Form 7W, which is just a tab on the Form 7, as of the end of December, we had approximately 4 months of data that should have been collected. There's been 32 operators which reported it, and over 130,000 rows of data have been collected. The web form, which is what we want people to submit this information on, submit the template. After being optimistic at our last opera meeting, thinking it would be done that week, it didn't get done, and then our developers had vacations and the holidays, and so with my apologies, we still do not have it quite ready, but everybody is back and ready to work, and we should be doing the final modifications today or tomorrow. And then this will be available for everyone to use to submit information on the Form 7 by the end of this week. We have a couple of asks for people with regards to their produced water information on the Form 7. And that is, first of all, that we'll make an announcement on our website about this being available and may send out a blast to everybody as well, an email just saying, hey, you can start using the Form 7 for produced water. We do want you to take anything you would have submitted already to Greg directly, just as a spreadsheet, and to upload that using the Form 7. So you're going to need to go back and submit those things, those previous reports, once the Form 7 is available. There is currently a limitation of 1,000 rows per submittal. And so I know in many operators' cases, that means submitting more than one Form 7. I am discussing with the developers the possibility of increasing that limit to see if we can do that. But for right now, there is going to be 1,000 rows per submittal limitation. So with that being said, hopefully there's going to be, these forms will be coming out soon, and we'll be working fast and furiously to try to get them, make them available as soon as possible. Thanks, Greg.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. And, I appreciate all of those submittals that I've been receiving via email. We had hoped that that would be, a month or maybe 2 months of email submittals, and instead we're going on the 5th month. And it will be a great assistance to just have operators, grab those spreadsheets that they've sent, put them into the Form 7. You don't have to report monthly production data in order to make that happen. You could just do the data template for the water and push that in, and that'll get it right into our system. If I have given folks feedback on that form, like, hey, instead of using the UIC disposal facility ID, please use the location ID. If you're able to make those changes and update that data, we would greatly appreciate that as well. Understanding that, we are, it is a significant ask, and we appreciate any help we get on that. And that's all.
I do have one other comment
to
add, Greg, and that is with regards to the Form 7, one of the modifications that's being made is there will be a checkbox on the monthly report of operations tab that you will be able to check so that you can submit just produced water information. Right now, there's a limitation that prevents you from doing that, and so that capability is going to be added so that you can submit that form if you're just submitting produced water data.
Thanks, Chris.
All right, thank you, Greg and Chris. We will now move on to questions. First question is, can you please remind us how to access the annual Bradenhead testing query tool?
Yeah, I'll take that one. So if you log into web forms, in the upper right corner, there is a link, and it's just titled Tools. And within that tool link, you'll have your ability to audit your Bradenhead program, wells that are overdue for MITs, and then that's where also the new tool to audit your wells for wellbore diagram compliance will also be based. And that is based off the operator number you've logged into within web forms. There's also the general Bradenhead tool on our website. If you click on data on that top header bar, then you choose the inspection incident button or link, and then there's a toggle button at the top to search for Bradenhead records there. And you can refine that search based on some various criteria, such as like location or operator number.
Awesome. Next question. At times, operators use wellbore diagrams as procedures for Form 6 NOIs. How do you want them to be labeled?
If it's a wellbore diagram, it should be labeled as a wellbore diagram. If it's text that outlines a procedure, it should be labeled as proposed plugging procedure. It's really important to get our attachments labeled correctly and not group them together. So don't have your single PDF with all these different criteria with one single upload. they need to be separate, and wellbore diagrams should be labeled as wellbore diagrams. There's instructions on our website. If you click on forms and you go to the Form 6, there's, for the Form 6 specifically, there's a really comprehensive checklist of how you get it right, and all the attachments are at the end of that document labeled with what they are, what they serve, and how they should be labeled as. So specifically rated the 6 and 10 question there. So, but if it's a wellbore diagram, please label it as wellbore diagram.
Awesome, thanks, Diane. Next question looks like it's for Greg. What source or records should an operator use to determine where the water was acquired from, industrial, ag, etc.?
Yeah, Mike, that should be the information that is consistent with what's either reported to or obtained from Division of Water Resources. And I did not, I started looking into that a little bit last week. I did not have a chance to fully kind of explore that, but I've been in contact with DWR, and those four categories seem to be consistent with their expectations for reporting. So if you have a contact at DWR, please reach out to that contact, individual operators, if it's something that you're reporting, in terms of how you're acquiring your water rights.
Thank you. Next question. The updated Form 7 with the produced water tab is still pending, correct? Or did I miss the release?
Chris, go
That is
ahead.
correct. Yes, it is still pending, and look for it by the end of this week. I'm hopeful maybe even tomorrow or Thursday, but certainly by the end of the week.
And again, we'll post on our homepage, and I think Chris had a suggestion of sending an email blast to the operator group, and I think that's a good idea when that's ready. So, yeah.
Thank you. Greg, another question for you. Can you elaborate on what is expected in section 5.3 for report vehicle miles traveled in relation to fresh water and produced water management? Might that also include vehicle miles traveled across state lines or just within Colorado?
So vehicle mileage reporting was not included in the statutory language that was adopted to modify 346134, or I guess not modify, but what came into 346134. So that was, it may have remained as a remnant of prior versions of the legislative activity in the introductory text, but it's not in the statute, so there's no reporting required there.
Thank you. Next question, should the quarterly report be the sum of the 3 monthly reports? How will the form be submitted, short-term and long-term?
So it will be the data that are reported on the quarterly report will be the summed by the operator of each month, with the exception of the production data, which is each individual month. So yeah, the operator should take all 3 months in the reporting period, sum them together, and that should be reported here in this quarterly report.
All right, next question. When submitting Form 7W for prior months, are we editing the previously submitted form, or are we submitting new forms? If new, do we need to enter the Form 7 portion as well, or just the 7W?
Chris, that may be a question that you need to answer, because I know they can modify data when submitting a monthly production report. They can resubmit, but in this case, I think it's new data.
So if something is new data, yeah, then you would just be submitting it as a new template with that information. If it's the data that you submitted to Greg, via just an email spreadsheet that was emailed, you would just take those and simply upload them exactly as you submitted them to Greg, and then they would go into the system. So you wouldn't be making any changes on them. Now, if something has changed since you submitted it to Greg, you can edit it and submit that edited version. But I assume in most cases, you're just taking what you sent to Greg and just attaching and uploading it to the Form 7.
Yeah, and Andrea, I see that you clarified that to say that it's the data submitted by Excel. And so, yeah, you'd take that Excel that you sent via email to me, and unless I had suggested that you make changes to the information provided in there, which for some folks I did, you can just submit that right into the Form 7. If I did make changes, or if I did suggest changes and you were going to make those changes going forward, if you have the ability to make the changes so that the data that comes in for those first 4 months is of higher quality, that would be excellent.
Awesome. Last question, how should reuse of gray water from a municipality be reported when it is used in lieu of fresh water? Gray water is not fresh water or produced water yet can still serve as a water source.
And my understanding is that the gray water, from our perspective, from ECMC's perspective, there's two types of water. There's produced water and there's fresh water. And so gray water falls into the bucket of fresh water because it is considered, I believe, by DWR to be in that water cycle. It's not non-tributary. It is in the freshwater bucket, even though it's certainly not, as you put in quotes, fresh.
Awesome. Looks like we have actually one more question here. Or more. When uploading spreadsheets to web forms, it only pulls information from the first tab. Will the new form and e-forms be able to pull all tabs, or will we have to submit each tab separately or as a PDF?
I believe, and Chris can check me if I'm wrong, essentially each tab on the new form will have a data template to upload. And so the tabs that I've laid out on my spreadsheet will be individual templates to upload, if you will. Does that sound about right, Chris?
Yeah, I'm trying to make sure I understand the question correctly.
Oh, this might be about the Excel files that were sent to me via email. And so some operators were reporting with multiple tabs for, let's say, different operator numbers that are under one umbrella operator, or were reporting, I think there were some other situations where there were a couple different reporting tabs. I'm recalling this now. So those would each have to be submitted individually. You'd have to blow those Excel sheets apart, I believe, in order to do that correctly.
That is correct, Greg, what you just said. If they had combined for different operators, then they need to submit them as separate Form 7s.
All right, it looks like that is the last question. Let me share my screen. Our next operator meeting is Tuesday, February 13th. And here is my email if you'd like to be added to the operator email list. Otherwise, I think we are all set. I don't see any more questions. So thanks so much for coming today.
Jenny, before we sign off, are you still, do you get emails from operators suggesting topics that they want to hear from us about, or does that not happen at all?
No, I only get requests to be added to the email list
Okay.
for updates for meetings and stuff like that. I do not get any topic suggestions.
Okay.
But I could, and I
Thanks.
can forward them along if that works.
Okay. Yeah. If you do receive any, please let us know.
Yeah, of course.
We want to be
of
relevant.
course.
Thanks.
Yeah, of course. All right, thanks so much for coming today. We'll see everybody next month.